For 18 years, my husband kept one room in our house locked. I never knew what was behind that door. I only knew that whenever I asked, Michael would smile, change the subject, or tell me there was nothing inside that I needed to see. I believed him. That was my first mistake. Because on the night of our 18th wedding anniversary, I found the key. And when I opened that door, I discovered that my husband had been keeping an entire second life hidden from me. But the worst part wasn't finding another woman. It wasn't finding the photographs. It wasn't even discovering the money he had secretly spent. The worst part was what I found at the very bottom of a box. A letter Michael had written 18 years earlier. A letter that made me realize he had known exactly what he was doing when he married me. And yet, somehow, by the time I reached the end of that letter, I would discover something even more painful. Michael had betrayed me for 18 years, while somehow, tragically, loving me all along. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. My name is Rebecca, and for most of my adult life, I believed I knew my husband. Michael and I met when we were both young enough to believe that love could solve almost anything. He was ambitious, charming, and determined to build something of his own. I was practical, patient, and willing to believe in him even when everyone else thought he was chasing impossible dreams. When we got married, we didn't have much. Our first apartment had peeling paint and a kitchen so small that only one person could stand in it comfortably. We laughed about it. We ate dinner sitting on the floor because we couldn't afford a proper dining table yet. Those were some of the happiest years of my life. Michael would come home from work exhausted, drop his keys on the counter, and tell me about all the things he was going to accomplish. I listened. I encouraged him. And when his first business failed, I stayed. When he lost money, I helped him recover. When he was ashamed of how badly things had gone, I reminded him that failure didn't make him a failure. I believed that was what marriage meant. You carried each other when one person couldn't stand. What I didn't know was that while I was carrying Michael, he was carrying something too. A secret. It started with a door. There was a small room at the back of our house, upstairs, between the guest bedroom and the old storage area. When we first bought the house, I asked Michael what we should do with it. He simply said, "Nothing." I laughed. "Nothing? Just leave it." "Why?" He looked at the door for a moment. Then he said, "I want that room private." I remember smiling because it seemed strange. "Private from your wife?" He kissed my forehead. "Just trust me." And I did. For 18 years, I did. We raised 2 children in that house. We celebrated birthdays there. We hosted Christmas dinners. We watched our children graduate. We survived arguments, financial problems, illnesses, and all the ordinary difficulties that come with a long marriage. And that door remained locked. Sometimes I would pass it and wonder. Sometimes I would tease Michael. "What exactly are you hiding in there?" He would laugh. "Nothing." Then open it. One day. That became his answer. One day. For 18 years. I eventually stopped asking. That's how secrets become normal. You don't accept them because they make sense. You accept them because you get tired of questioning them. By the time our 18th anniversary arrived, I barely noticed the door anymore. That morning, Michael surprised me. He had arranged dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. He bought me a necklace and told me he wanted to celebrate everything we'd survived together. He looked at me across the table and said something I'll never forget. "If I had to do it all over again, Rebecca, I'd still choose you." I smiled. I believed him. That night, we came home, and I went upstairs to change. Michael took off his jacket and left it on the chair in our bedroom. A few minutes later, I noticed something sticking out of the pocket. It was a small brass key. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the number engraved on it. 18. My heart skipped. I knew that number. It was the same number Michael had once painted on the locked room's door before removing it years ago. I stood there holding the key. For 18 years, I had respected his privacy. But suddenly, something inside me told me that I had spent 18 years respecting a lie. Michael had already gone downstairs. I slipped the key into my pocket. I waited until I heard the front door close. Then I walked upstairs. I stood in front of the locked room. My hands were shaking. I inserted the key. It turned easily. The door opened, and I immediately knew something was wrong. The room wasn't storage. It wasn't an office. It wasn't filled with old business records. It was perfectly organized, almost preserved. There were boxes along the walls, photographs, documents, clothes, letters, and on one shelf sat my wedding dress. I froze. My wedding dress, the one I had thought was lost after we moved houses years ago. I walked toward it and touched the fabric. Beside it were photographs of our wedding, photographs of our children, photographs of me. Some of them were so old that I didn't even remember when they had been taken. I opened the first box. Inside were things I had forgotten existed. The birthday card I gave Michael on our first anniversary. The letter I wrote him when his business failed. A photograph of us standing outside our first apartment. My old diary. A pair of earrings I had lost 12 years earlier. Everything was there. Everything. It was as if Michael had taken pieces of my life and placed them inside that room. At first, I felt strangely comforted. I thought maybe this was his secret. Maybe he had been preserving our memories. Maybe the locked room wasn't a betrayal. Maybe it was love. Then I saw the folder. It was sitting on the desk. There was one word written across the front. Rebecca. I opened it. And my stomach dropped. Inside was a list. Not memories. Not love letters. A list of everything I had sacrificed for Michael. My job. My savings. My jewelry. My inheritance. The promotion I turned down when our children were young. The investment I withdrew from when his company was struggling. Every sacrifice had a date beside it. Every sacrifice had an amount beside it. And some had notes. Rebecca's savings, used for expansion. Jewelry sold, $18,400. Promotion declined, more time available for family. I stared at the pages. Michael had documented everything. I didn't understand why. Then I turned another page. There was a column I hadn't noticed. It was titled, What Rebecca Believes. Underneath it were sentences. She believes the business will eventually belong to both of us. She believes the house is our greatest investment. She believes I have never stopped loving her. I couldn't breathe. I dropped the folder. And for the first time in 18 years, I wondered whether my entire marriage had been something I misunderstood. I kept searching, and then I found the photographs. Michael. Another woman. At first, I didn't recognize her. Then I did. Her name was Claire. She had worked with Michael years ago. I remembered meeting her once at a company dinner. I remembered Michael introducing her as a business associate. Nothing about that evening had seemed strange, but the photographs told a different story. There were photographs of Michael and Claire at restaurants, at hotels, on vacations, at Christmas. There were photographs of them together with 2 children, and the dates went back 17 years. 17 years. I sat on the floor. Our daughter had been 2 years old when those photographs began. Our son hadn't even been born. I looked at the photographs again. Then I noticed the children's names. Daniel. Sophie. I kept staring. Michael had another family. Not a brief affair. Not one mistake. Another family. For 17 years. While I was at home raising our children, Michael had been building a second life somewhere else. I found bank statements. Private school payments. Mortgage payments. Vacation expenses. Medical bills. All paid by Michael. Money from our accounts. Money from the business. Money I had helped him build. I felt something inside me break. Not because he had loved another woman. Because suddenly every sacrifice I had made looked different. When I sold my jewelry, I thought I was saving our business. I was helping pay for their life. When I stayed home with our children, believing Michael needed freedom to grow his company, he was using that freedom to visit another family. When I celebrated his success, I didn't know some of that success was financing a life he had hidden from me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I kept searching. And that's when I found the letter. It was inside an envelope marked with a date, June 14, 2008. the day before our wedding. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was from Claire. She had written to Michael the night before our wedding. I read it once, then again, then a third time. She knew. She knew he was marrying me. She knew he was building a life with me. And she had written one sentence that destroyed me. If you're marrying her, promise me you won't stop loving us. I couldn't move. Our wedding had never been the beginning of our story. There had already been another story, one I didn't know existed. I found Michael's reply beneath it. He had written, "I will take care of both of you. I promise." I covered my mouth. Both of you. He hadn't stumbled into this. He had planned it. He had stood in front of me 18 years earlier, looked into my eyes, promised to love me forever, and walked into our marriage carrying another promise. I stayed in that room until dawn. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know everything. And what I discovered over the next 3 days was worse. Michael had planned to leave me. The paperwork was already prepared. A divorce agreement, property arrangements, financial transfers, even a timeline. The date he planned to tell me was written at the top. The day after our 18th anniversary. My anniversary gift suddenly felt like a funeral. The necklace, the dinner, the words, "I'd choose you all over again." He had lied to my face while preparing to leave me. But there was one thing I couldn't understand. Why keep the room? Why preserve every piece of our marriage? Why keep my letters? Why keep my wedding dress? Why keep photographs of me? If Michael had wanted another life, why hadn't he simply erased me from his heart? I found the answer in another box. It contained photographs of me that had been taken secretly over the years. Me sleeping on the couch. Me cooking. Me helping our daughter with homework. Me laughing in the kitchen. Me standing in the garden. Me sitting beside Michael in the hospital when he had surgery. There were hundreds. I looked at them for a long time, and something didn't make sense. A man who hated his wife wouldn't keep photographs like these. A man who felt nothing wouldn't preserve every letter she had ever written him. A man who wanted to forget wouldn't lock away 18 years of memories. I needed answers. So I waited. When Michael came home, I acted normal. He kissed me. I smiled. He asked how my day was. I said, "Fine." For the next week, I watched him, and I began noticing things I'd never noticed before. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't watching. The way he still remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. The way he automatically reached for my hand when we crossed the street. The way he called me whenever he arrived somewhere safely. Small things. Familiar things. Things that made everything more confusing. One evening, I finally confronted him. I placed the brass key on the table. Michael stopped breathing. He looked at me, then at the key, and I watched 18 years of lies collapse across his face. He whispered my name. "Rebecca." I said nothing. I placed the photographs on the table, then the bank statements, then the letter. His face changed when he saw it. "You weren't supposed to find that." I laughed bitterly. "That seems to be the problem, Michael. I wasn't supposed to find anything." He sat down. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "I love you." I stared at him. After everything I had found, those 3 words almost made me angry. "Don't say that. It's true. You had another family. I know. You lied to me for 18 years. I know. You used my money. I know. You planned to leave me." His eyes filled with tears. "I know." I stood up. "Then don't tell me you love me." He looked at me. I thought I could separate the 2 parts of my life. 2 parts? My life with you. And the promise I made to Claire. I shook my head. "Don't call it a promise. Call it what it was." He lowered his head. A betrayal. For the first time, Michael didn't defend himself. He didn't blame Claire. He didn't blame circumstances. He didn't blame the past. He simply sat there and cried. And then he told me the truth. He had loved Claire once. He had promised her he would never abandon her. But when he met me, everything changed. He fell in love with me. He knew he should end the other relationship. But he was afraid. Afraid of hurting Claire. Afraid of admitting what he had done. Afraid of losing me. So he tried to keep both. And every year he told himself he would fix it tomorrow. Tomorrow became a year. A year became 5. 5 became 10. And eventually, 18 years had passed. I asked him one question. Then why were you going to leave me? He looked at me through his tears. I wasn't sure anymore. What does that mean? I thought I could finally choose. Choose who? He couldn't answer. I walked away. But Michael wasn't finished. He followed me upstairs. He stood outside the locked room. And for the first time in 18 years, he opened the door himself. He walked inside. He looked at the boxes, the photographs, my wedding dress, everything he had hidden. Then he picked up one photograph. It was a picture of me holding our newborn son. He stared at it for a long time, and then he whispered, "I thought I was protecting the life I wanted." He looked at me. I didn't realize I was destroying the only life I actually loved. I cried. Not because I forgave him, because I finally understood the tragedy. Michael hadn't spent 18 years without loving me. He had spent 18 years loving me, and still choosing to betray me. And somehow, that hurt more. He asked me to give him another chance. I looked at the man I had loved for 18 years. The man who had broken my heart. The man who had built a secret life. The man who had somehow kept every piece of our marriage because he couldn't bear to lose it. And I said, "I believe you love me now." His eyes filled with hope. Then I finished. "But loving me now doesn't erase what you did to me for 18 years. His face fell. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I understand. I don't know if I can forgive you. I understand. And I don't know if there is a future for us." He nodded through his tears. "I understand." For once, Michael wasn't asking me to understand him. He was finally understanding me. The next morning, he left the house. He went to Claire. But the life he had spent 18 years protecting wasn't waiting for him anymore. Claire had learned the truth too. She had spent years believing Michael would eventually choose her. Now that he finally came to her, she asked him the question he had avoided for 18 years. "Do you love me?" Michael couldn't answer, because the truth was finally impossible to escape. He had loved Claire. But Rebecca was home, and he had destroyed his home trying to keep another life alive. Claire told him to leave. Michael returned to the house one final time to collect his things. The locked room was open. There was no key in the door anymore. Rebecca had removed the lock. She had taken her wedding dress, her journals, her photographs, her children's memories, everything that belonged to her. The room was almost empty. Michael stood in the doorway. "You're keeping it open?" Rebecca nodded. "Yes. What are you going to do with it?" She looked around the room. "For the first time, I'm going to decide that myself." Michael nodded. He wanted to say something. Anything. But there was nothing left to say. He walked downstairs. Before he left, he turned around. Rebecca was standing at the top of the stairs. For 18 years, he had been terrified she would discover the room. Now he realized the room had never been the thing he should have feared. He should have feared the day Rebecca finally saw him clearly, because once she did, she could never unknow him. Michael walked out, and Rebecca closed the front door. Not because she knew she would never love him again. Not because she knew she would never forgive him, but because, for the first time in 18 years, the decision about what happened next belonged entirely to her. And behind her, the room that had held 18 years of secrets stood open. No lock, no key, no more hiding. Just an empty room waiting to become something new. And perhaps that was the cruelest part of all. Michael had spent 18 years trying to keep 2 lives. In the end, he lost the one person he finally realized he could never live without. And Rebecca? She didn't know yet whether she would ever let him back into her life. But for the first time, she knew she didn't have to decide for him. If you were Rebecca, after discovering that Michael had betrayed you for 18 years, but finally admitted that you were the woman he truly loved, would you give him another chance? Or would 18 years of betrayal be unforgivable? Tell me what you would do in the comments.